Welcome to another episode of Software Explorations, Concept and Overviews, hosted by yours truly, Tech Coach Ralph, where we are always engineered to win. In today's episode, we are going to talk about test automation frameworks. So let's get into it. All right, so like I said, the topic is test automation frameworks. What is our agenda for today? So we are going to talk about what test automation is. If you're not new to the channel, I suspect you already know, as we've done a lot of that here on this channel. But if you are new to the channel, this will be a great learning opportunity for you. If you're looking to become a QA engineer, maybe you are a manual tester not familiar with automation testing, this is a great opportunity for you to grow your knowledge in the field. All right. So we are going to talk about some of the challenges that we face with test automation and how some automation frameworks can help alleviate those challenges. We're going to talk about the key components of automation frameworks and some framework types. We're going to talk about the advantages of using an automation framework, as well as some popular frameworks that we use across the industry. And this we're going to di- we're going to dive into how to choose a framework. And I'm going to give you a demo of a framework that I have created that I worked on for a technical project. And then we are going to conclude our presentation. All right, so let's get into it. So, what in the world is test automation? Test automation is the process of using software tools and scripts to automate the execution of test cases and the validation of software applications. It is a fundamental component of software testing, especially in the context of continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines. Test automation aims to streamline and improve the efficiency of the software testing process by reducing manual intervention and human errors. So, just like you see automation in all sectors of life nowadays, test automation is to help reduce manual effort and human error because it is just impossible to test everything manually with human effort. All right. So, what are some of the challenges that we faced with test automation? So, a big one is the initial investment, right? The upfront cost is it can be monetarily, depending on maybe if you're not using open source, if you're using licensing, it can be resource heavy, right? Because you're going to need infrastructure to be able to run your automated tests. It could be an educational investment, as not everyone who is in QA may know how to write automation code and things of that nature. So it can be a very costly initial investment to get started with automation. The maintenance of automation as well, because if it's not written properly, then there might be a lot of updates. Every time a little change is made, you might have a whole suite of tests to update. And then you have to know how to manage your test data. I remember when I first got started in automation, I would hard code all of my test data inside of the automated test, and it made it almost impossible to manage the test. Right. So then we have our environments, because if you are working on a software development team, chances are that you will have multiple environments that you need to run your test in, and you need to have them to pass. So you can't write your test to only work in one environment. And then we have the tooling. There are so many automation tools out there. We have Selenium WebDriver, we have Cypress, we have Playwright, we have Detox, we have Behave, we have Cucumber, we have what else do we have? We have SpecFlow, we have Mocha, we have Jest. So many are out there, right? And it's like, which one do we choose? You know, it's it can be very challenging. Then we have the test case design. We need to write our test cases to make them in an automatable fashion, right? Then we have parallel testing, because when we have tons of test cases that need to be executed, how can we execute them in a fast and efficient manner? And then we have the skills and training, which relates to the initial investment, right? How do you get everyone up to speed on how to write proper automated tests? And then lastly, you need to do a cost benefit analysis. Do we have enough test cases that we need to actually have an automated suite? What type of software do we need? Do we need a licensed software? Do we need one that is open source? So you need to see, okay, what is this actually going to cost the company if we start automating our tests, if we don't have any already? And what tests qualify to be automated that'll make sense. All right. So those are the challenges that all QA engineers face when it comes to automation. But in comes the test automation frameworks. What's the purpose of the frameworks, right? So the frameworks give you a structured design, they offer reusability, they offer modularity, data-driven testing, reporting and logging, test environment management, error handling and recovery. Best practices are normally integrated in the frameworks and they provide you with the right automation tooling. So let's just touch on a few of these, right? Structured design. The good thing about with the framework is you're able to separate things that are similar, right? So you don't have spaghetti code where things are integrated all over the place and it's hard to figure out what's going on. It's very well designed so that you can have, for instance, let's say you're doing a UI testing framework, right? And maybe it includes API and API framework as well. You can have the API test in one location, or not the API test, but all the things that are related to API testing in one location. Have everything related to the UI testing in one location, and things related to setting up your drivers in one location, things that are related to your reporting and your logging in one location, things that for test data in one location, right? And then inside your test, you can call upon those and use them that way, which is pretty much what the modularity part of it is, right? And then by setting it up that way, it becomes reusable within your tests, right? But also it becomes the framework becomes reusable across different projects, which to me that's the most important part. Having one framework that can be reused all over the place, right? And then when there's updates to the frameworks in those different projects, you just need to update the version. Then that should be able to pull in the most latest version of the frameworks. It gives you all the latest and greatest features, right? And then in the framework, like I mentioned, you should be able to handle flakiness and errors and try to recover the test instead of it just crashing like it would normally do inside of a regular like test that has no framework, right? And that's the way that we implement the best practices inside of those frameworks. And for the right automation tooling based on the framework that you choose, you're able to implement that tooling right in there. And believe it or not, I believe that with the right framework, you should be able to swap out different, like, underlying automation, like the underlying framework to be able to change it to a different one without having much effect on the actual packages or projects that are using it. So, but that would be a good like that would be a good thing to try, but your framework code has to be very, very clean and not tightly coupled to the underlying framework. All right, so what are some of the key components of test automation frameworks? So, test automation frameworks are structured set of guidelines and best practices and tools that provide a foundation for efficient and effective test automation. The specific components of a test automation framework can vary depending on the framework's design and the requirements of the project. Right? So then various types of test automation frameworks such as data driven, keyword driven, behavior driven, and more each have their own specific components and design principles. The choice of a framework and its components should align with the choice of a framework and its components should align with the project's goals, requirements, and specific challenges it needs to address. So, what are some of the framework types, right? We have linear scripting, module based, data driven, keyword driven, there's hybrid, there's behavior driven, there's robot driven, and then we have Appium or robot framework, and then we have Appium and Espresso mobile for mobile, right? Um, we'll probably touch in a separate video specifically on the framework types, but to touch on a few of them real quick, right? So the data driven, right? This is probably the one that I use the most, where I externalize the data, whether it's through a CSV file or I do it through I can do a CSV file, I can do Excel file. One of the coolest ways that I've done it was externalizing it to a Google Sheet, so that way it's completely separated from the, um from the project, and that way it can be the test data can be updated totally externally, and you don't have to actually go into the project and add a new file to it or update the file that's part of it, right? And then the robot framework, that one is for automating desktop applications, and then we have Appium and Espresso, which are used to automate like mobile testing, mobile devices, and things like that. Which I think all three of those are like very handy in your journey as a QA engineer. Right. So, what are some advantages of automation frameworks? Right. So, test automation frameworks offer several advantages in the context of software testing and quality assurance. These advantages contribute to more efficient, more effective, and reliable testing processes. Overall, test automation frameworks play a crucial role in enhancing the quality and reliability of software products while streamlining the testing process. So, what are some popular frameworks? We have Selenium, probably the most popular Selenium WebDriver, right? Then we have Appium, which is used for mobile testing, but it's also built on top of Selenium. So, a lot of the things that you're able to do with Selenium, right? You're able to do it in Appium as well, but is directed to doing it on mobile devices. All right. So, if you know Selenium, it's very easy to pick up Appium. The only difference is that you just need to know, like, how to configure the external sources, like, you need to install the Appium software, you need to kn whether you're using a tool like, BrowserStack or Sauce Labs or Amazon, AWS Device Farm, you need to be able to configure Appium to be able to connect to those, right? But the code itself is very similar to what you'd be doing in Selenium WebDriver. Then we have TestNG and JUnit, which are testing libraries, testing frameworks, which can drive your automated tests, like to specify where to run it, how to run it, what tests to run. JUnit, from what I've seen, is mostly used by the software engineers and developers, while TestNG is very popular amongst QA engineers who work in Java. Both of them are Java testing frameworks. Very similar, but they do have some differences. I personally use TestNG a lot more for automation, and I probably doing some development. I've gone back and forth between JUnit and TestNG. All right. Then we have Cucumber, Behave, SpecFlow. Those are BDD, behavior driven development frameworks, right? Cucumber is for Java, Behave is for Python, and SpecFlow is for C Sharp and .NET, right? Then we have Robot Framework, which I mentioned previously. That's for automating desktop applications. We have Jasmine and Cypress, who both work with JavaScript. We have PyTest, and we have Rest Assured, and we have and then we have the ones that you can build on your own, custom built, right? And then there's some other ones as well that are very popular, such as Playwright and Detox, and like the amount of tools for automation frameworks they just keep on growing. But these right here are probably the most popular, while Playwright might be the one that is growing the fastest, the most up and coming, right? But by all means, I would say Selenium WebDriver is the most popular automation framework that to this day, right? Most jobs that you'd be looking for, they are going to be requiring you to do Selenium WebDriver either in Java or in Python. All right. All right. So, how do you choose a test automation framework? So, first and foremost, you have to define your objectives, right? What are you trying to get out of this automation framework? Then I would say you have to evaluate your application. Also, importantly, what is the level of your team's skills to be able to use this framework that you're going to build, right? Or that team creating the framework, what is the level of their skills? Do they have the ability to create it at this moment? All right. Do they need to get some additional skills in order to be able to create it, maintain it, use it? All right. Now, what is your testing environment? What is going to be the way that you connect to this test environment? What about the budgeting and licensing fees? Are you going to go fully open sourced? Are you going to license the software? All that has to be taken into consideration. Now, if you license the software, is everything that you built going to be tied to that software? What if you want to pivot one day to a different software? Do you have to rewrite all your tests? Are they transferable? Now, does this automation software or does this framework that you're using that you need to build, does it support your preferred programming language? If you've never done Java anymore, then maybe Selenium WebDriver in Java is not the best for you. Maybe TestNG is not the best for you. Maybe you've done Python, so maybe you'd want to go with PyTest and Selenium WebDriver in Python, right? Or maybe you are a JavaScript person. Maybe you need to use like a WebDriver.io, or maybe you want to use Cypress or Playwright. You know, it just depends. You need to take all of that into consideration. Continue with choosing a framework. Can your framework integrate with the CI/CD pipeline, the continuous integration and continuous delivery? That is a big part of automation. So you need to make sure that the framework that you're going to choose or the one that you're going to build is able to integrate, right? You need to be able to integrate with tools maybe like Jenkins or like Team City, Circle CI. You have to make sure that you're going to be able to connect to those CI/CD pipelines. And here's probably one of the most important ones, right? What is the community of that framework and the documentation like, right? From here's the interesting thing, right? From some of the licensed automation tools and frameworks, I found that I tend to get more support from the ones that are open source because there is such a much wider community using it than the licensed ones, especially with the price ranges of those licensed ones. So, you have to take into consideration what type of documentation in there is there, what type of community support is there, because like a lot of times you get stuck. Those are going to be the ones who help you out. Like using Selenium WebDriver, I've gotten so much help from Stack Overflow, from the Selenium WebDriver website, from different blogs, compared to when I was using a tool like HP's Unified Functional Testing. Almost the only people that we could rely on were the licensing companies support, and those licenses were super expensive, so you need to take all of that into consideration, alright? So, you also want to make sure that the type of reporting and logging that is part of the framework that you are either, going to use or that you're building, right? You need to have good reporting and logging, and now, how much can you customize and extend your framework? That is super important as well. Then we have scalability and parallel execution. When you start adding a lot more tests, is it able to handle it? How long does it take to run the test? You don't want to have tests that take hours upon hours to run, because it's just not going to be maintainable. And lastly, maintenance and upkeep, right? What is the type of maintenance needed? Is it Do you need to update different packages or libraries in there? Or like what kind of enhancements can you make to the framework? Who's managing the maintenance and the upkeep? So all of those things you really need to consider when choosing a framework. In addition to that, right? What about compliance and regulations? Is your framework in compliance with government regulations? For example, like HIPAA laws, right? How does it handle test data, user data? You know? So, I would recommend doing a proof of concept for your framework, right? Whichever one you're choosing, whether you're purchasing one, whether you're creating one, you need to do a proof of concept that can show how all of the things that we're listing here can be taken care of so that you can make a choice as a group of what's the best route to go, right? And then is there vendor support? For instance, like on the open source ones, there's not quote unquote vendor support, but like we mentioned earlier, there's a wide community of support and tons of resources that you can get knowledge from. All right. So then the tool ecosystem based on what are you adding to your framework, what tools you're using, like all of that, right? And then always check for feedback and references on other people's experiences with particular frameworks, particular companies, particular tools, and see like, will this framework work for you? Right. So let's get into a example of a framework that I worked on when I was doing a technical project. All right. So let's just go through this real quick. Right. So in this framework, I have the part where it is generating the drivers. It is handling my reporting through extent reports, and I'm handling the assertions. So if you look here, right? So I don't have this actual framework externalized, right? Because it was just a technical project that I was doing. But this is the same framework that I used in a different project. What I did was I just copied it from a different project, but the like if this was like an official framework of mine, right? I would totally have it externalized, and that way I can just import it into a different project through my Maven um, POM file, right? So I would just go in here and I would say, oh, import this project or import this framework that I created from wherever it's uploaded. Maybe it's uploaded to GitHub, maybe it's uploaded to NVN repository, right? And by the way, this project is written in Java, right? Using Selenium WebDriver, using TestNG, using exit reports. So if you look in here, you'll see I like so to build this framework, right? Looking at my POM file, right? I'm using the WebDriver Manager by Bonnie Garcia, right? So I'm using different frameworks to create my own custom framework, right? So I'm using exit reports, using a TestNG data provider extension. Um, not I don't even remember what this one is. And we have TestNG, we have Selenium API and Selenium Java, right? So all of these tools are being used. All of these packages and mini frameworks or frameworks of their own rights are being used in this project in order for me to create my own framework, right? So now in this framework folder, if we look at the top level first, right? So I'm creating my assertions because I'm using TestNG to do my assertions, but in order to simplify my assertions so I don't have to write the same code over and over and over again, what I did is close this one out. What I did is I'm calling the TestNG assertion here, right? And I have this print statement, which is part of the framework, where I simplify how I output text and send it to the logging into the reporting, right? And I say, okay, this is my expected results, and I'm passing in a parameter through there, and I'm saying this is my actual results, and I'm passing the actual results through here, right? And I'm saying, okay, the status passed, and if it and take a screenshot. If I say to take a screenshot, right? And then I say, however, if it failed, then do this, right? So I'm saying pass the expected results, pass the actual results, and then say the test failed, right? And this is all logging to the reporting and everything like that. So, and then I'm saying also, if it fails, give me the URL that it failed on, right? I haven't seen like I created this customized assertion so that I can easily troubleshoot when I have a test that fails, right? I can know exactly where to go. I can go to the page. I have a screenshot of what failed, right? So the the libraries, the tools that I am importing into this project, they don't do that by default. So I created this to be able to customize to my needs, and then I can use that across different projects that I use, right? Maybe one day I will actually convert this into a full framework where I can import into any project that I need to, and then I can make it available to you guys to use as well. So that's something that I will definitely take into consideration. All right. So now let's look at the base driver, right? In the base driver, what am I doing? So I'm setting a parameter, or I'm setting a variable, right? A string variable for what URLs to start the test on. Okay. And then I'm saying, and I'm setting a thread local WebDriver so I can run my test in parallel. And now I'm setting up my driver, right? So here in the part of the framework, I'm saying, okay, as part of the framework, I want to be able to decide what browser I want my test to run on. So here I'm using the WebDriver manager that we saw in the POM file, where I'm saying, okay, if they choose Firefox, then set up the Firefox driver. If they choose Chrome, set up the Chrome driver. If they pick Safari, if they choose Safari, set up the Safari driver, IE, Edge, etc. Right? And then I can easily come in here and add more browsers to it. Like let's say I think there's a browser called Brave. I could like if they have a driver for Brave, I can come in here and add a new driver for Brave, right? And maybe I'll research into that and I will update that as part of this framework, right? And then, so here I come down here and I say, okay, now that my drivers are set up, let me go ahead and be able to start my drivers. Okay, and I'm defaulting it to Chrome. So this part right here is being done by TestNG. This parameter that I'm passing in here, that's being done by TestNG, right? But it's all being put together to create my own personal framework. Okay. So if we keep going, so here I'm saying, all right, so once the browser opens up, let's go ahead and maximize the browser, and I'm setting an implicit wait of 15 seconds. All right. So here I'm saying, all right, after the tests are done, after a test is ran, right? Let's clean up the driver. If I set it to true, if close browser after run is set to true, then close it. If not, then leave the browser open. Sometimes I like to leave the browser open when I'm troubleshooting to see like if it failed, where it's failing and why it's failing. All right. Then here I'm saying before the test actually runs, I need to start the test. I'm defaulting it to this URL right here, this web surround store URL, because that was the technical project. But in a framework, I probably just put it to google.com, right? And then you can pass the value of the test that you want, of the URL that you want to run your test on through the TestNG file, TestNG parameter, right? And then here I'm just doing a getter where I can actually get the URL to start the test. So I can just pass that into my actual test. All right. And while we're here, let's look at it. Let's look at an actual test so we can see how that looks. Right. So we'll just see this part of it. Let's go to test cases. Test add to cart flow. Right. So in here, I'm extending the base driver. Right. I'm extending the base driver. And here, so here I'm importing some stuff that we haven't looked at yet, but we did see this part last week, right? So the only thing we haven't seen yet is this part. But we last week in our page object model guide, we saw here we saw the main navigation, the search results, the product details, the shopping cart, right? So this assertion we already went through the assertion that's coming from this. We saw this one just coming from here. Right? The assertion is coming from here, and we haven't reviewed this one yet, so we're gonna do that next, right? So here we are instead here we are starting up our navigation, our search results, and like I said, we're gonna look at this one in a little bit, and we already saw this one, right? So here we're saying all right, so in that case, let's look at this one first, right? Because that one will give more context, right? So we're here, and I'm saying So here we're saying, right, we're starting. We have a constructor. Like this is very similar to what we saw in the page object model, but this is not the page object model, right? It works. It works very similarly, but I'm saying, okay, for the WebDriver actions, right? I want to start off my driver, and I'm also putting a WebDriver wait in here, right? And I'm saying, okay, go to URL. So I can just call this method and navigate to a URL. And what it's going to do when I call this method, right? It's going to print, navigate to URL. Right, and what is the print method? Because there is not a print method default by in Java, right? So if we go to this print method, it's going to it's calling another print method, right? And it's going text to output, which I'm passing here, and stat is 0. So let's go to this one as well. So inside of this print method, it's saying the string text to output the status, right? So I'm saying so here is say reporter.log, which is using the TestNG reporter, right? When creating the reports for TestNG, right? And I'm saying the status to log the test, right? So this is for extent reports where it's going to say what is the status of that step, right? We go back here, and so I'm saying okay, so this go to URL, and so I have the prints all over the place because in my tests I do not need to in my tests I do not need to put a print statement every single time. You don't need this. I don't need to put a print statement every. You don't see any print statements in this test, right? In these tests, right? For any system out print, right? All I have, the only place I have my prints are in here because I can pass them through my tests in order to handle the documentation, right? So then I have a method for click where I'm saying I'm passing the web element to click on, and I'm passing the description of what I'm going to click on. So it says I'm gonna click on, and then I'm gonna pass in the element name, and then it's going to wait until that element is clickable before it actually clicks it. And I do the same thing for inputting text, same thing for entering a password and the sorts, right? And the reason I separate the text from the password because I don't want the password to be outputted, right? Because for compliance and privacy reasons, right? So so that's this one right here. And so now if you noticed, right, we will have, for instance, all right, so let's look at the main nav search for item on site. I click here and so search for item on site, which we saw in the page object model one, and I go here. You see, I'm using the WebDriver actions, right? And I'm doing enter text into input field and get search input field, right? And I'm passing the name and I'm passing the search term that I'm going to be searching for, right? So and then inside of the framework, we have reporting that's available through extent reports. We have a listener that's available through extent reports. We have the way to actually run the test through through a TestNG XML file where you can pass what test you want to run, the URL that you want it to run on. You want it to close the browser after the test runs, and you have a listener to use the the extent reports listener, right? So all of this, right? After it runs, you can run it in parallel, all that good stuff, right? But at the end of the day, when the test finished running, we should get a report that looks like this. You should get a report that looks like this, right? Where it says the navigate to the website, enter text in the search field, click on the search button, and then the validation passed, right? So you see all this validation passed, right? This test was checking to make sure like all the products loaded on the page, and it takes a screenshot, empties the cart, screenshots all over the place, right? So, um, so that's what this framework is built to do, and it can also have the ability to. I'm not sure if I added it as part of this framework, right? But you can also have the ability to run it remotely in the cloud, maybe through Sauce Labs, maybe through AWS Device Farm, maybe through Browser Stack, whatever the case may be, right? Or you can even run it on a Selenium grid that's hosted locally as well. Whatever the case may be, however you want to run it, right? But those are the things that you can do with a framework, you know. So let's go back to the presentation. So let's go back to the presentation. So that was our framework example, framework that I created, and I'll probably finish it up and make it available to the public. That way you can use the TechCoach automation framework in Java, and maybe I'll create one for Python as well. Who knows? Let me know in the comments if you Let me know in the comments if you think that you would find that valuable if I was to finalize this framework and make it available to use for you in Java and maybe in Python as well. Put in the comments what language you would like it in and if you'd find it valuable for me to make it available to you. Right. So, in conclusion, we spoke about some of the automation challenges that we face. We spoke about how the automation frameworks can help alleviate some of those automation challenges. And we to me, my favorite test automation framework is the ones that I build, right? Because I have full control and autonomy over it. I know all the challenges that I face in automation, and I think that being in in this position for so long, I can kind of see what challenges that you'll face. So I try to put those in there as well for you. And my advice on automation challenges, go ahead and try to create your own, right? It's not an easy thing to do, but it helps your critical thinking skills enhance so much because you have to think of all the challenges when you're creating an automation framework. You can't just think of one project, one scenario. You need to think of it as a whole, and how that you how that you can satisfy many projects and build it that way, right? But I think that it's a great learning experience and it will do you tons and tons of value. All right. So that is our presentation. And so that's my presentation on test automation frameworks. I really hope that you found this video useful and valuable, and it adds additional context. It adds additional insight into test automation frameworks. I'll probably do another video that is specific to managing test data and automation frameworks because that one is a tricky one, right? I'm actually working on a project on how to use AWS Secrets Manager to manage your passwords and stuff, so you don't need to pass passwords around in your test. So that's something that we will look into. We'll talk about. So look out for those videos coming forward, right? So and the best way to look out for the video is subscribe to the channel, right? The notification bell so you can know when we go live every time we drop a new video. I drop videos almost just about every day because there's so much to learn, so much to share, and I just hope that I can continue to add tons and tons of value into your life. So that's about it for today. If you haven't done so yet, please like the video, share the video with somebody who you think will find it useful, or watch it again because maybe you missed something. Definitely watch the video again. I just hope that you find these videos informative. Leave me a comment, send me an email, Ralph@techcoachingwithralph.com, and we can go from there. But until next time, friends, families, this is Tech Coach Ralph signing off.
If you enjoyed the fascinating information shared in this video and you want more, be sure to hit the subscribe button to Tech Coach Ralph to be notified for new videos.